Good day and welcome to the iGaming channel from the Casino Marketing Shop. Today I'm delighted to introduce you to Hannah Farrugia from AvatarUX. Hi Hannah,
Hi.
how are you doing?
Hi, Chris. I'm great. Hope you're great as well. Thanks a lot for having me here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks very much for your time today. So should we start with, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and AvatarUX?
Absolutely. So I'm working as head of studio at AvatarUX, who's a game provider in the iGaming space, and I essentially lead the product direction across our game portfolio, from concept to launch, and also maintenance and post services. So making sure each game not only delivers a high quality experience, but also performs in the market. I work very closely with mathematicians, UXers, designers, artists, and everybody involved in creating the game. And we're also very focused on leveraging player data and especially focused on looking at market trends to shape engaging and commercially successful mechanics.
So how does the production process of a slot machine work from start to finish? How does that process go?
So it's definitely a very lengthy process, I would say, but we've refined it over the years into something more natural. And it always starts with an idea. And most of our ideas come from data or feedback that we get from previous releases, because now we have over 50 games in the market. So we've had many opportunities to learn about what works, what doesn't work. You know, some things work really well in a particular market for a particular player base, and others don't work that well for a particular player base. So we look into, okay, what can we learn from our previous release? And we can see, you know what, this mechanic worked well, but we got player feedback directly that they would like it to have a bit of a different flow, or that it could maybe pay a bit more frequently. So we gather all our data and we come up with some ideas that we feel would have the best success in the market. And from an internal perspective, we also get marketing and commercial involved at a very early stage. So we make sure that the concept is not only like feasible from a technical perspective so that we can build it, but it's also an idea that our commercial team can actually pitch and sell. And it's also an idea that our marketing team can market, because it would be pointless creating something that, you know, you can build but can't go out there. So we start with the idea, we pitch it internally, we get feedback, and then we start prototyping, and we have the pre-production part of the development phase. And we prototype until we get a math model that kind of feels really rewarding, that has some really good hit frequencies, and where we can say, okay, this mechanic actually feels great. And if it doesn't feel great, we might actually scrap the idea or make changes to the idea. We had games with many versions of prototypes, something from 5 prototypes to even hundreds of prototypes. But we really want to make something that we're confident in and that feels great. And in parallel, we also think about the visual feel, the look of the game, what market we're trying to target. You know, are we going for a specific market where we need to tailor the game to a specific audience, or are we going for something a bit that casts a wider net and a general, have more of a general kind of feel? Then when we're happy with that, we actually start building and piecing all the components of the game together. It goes in development and QA, and again, we're making sure, okay, do the sounds feel good? Does the flow feel good? Does everything feel, you know, snappy and light and easy to play, easy for the player to understand? Then finally it goes out, it gets launched, and we also, you know, have a post production kind of process where we're constantly observing the data, monitoring for any, you know, reports from players. And 30 days usually after the first launch, we start logging the retention and other metrics, and we have like a bit of an internal sync and look at, okay, what went well on this game production, what didn't go well, how will we make the next one better?
That's really interesting. So each of your 50 games gets better and evolves as it goes along.
Absolutely. And I think something that's maybe a bit distinct about AvatarUX is that we're not leaning on any extreme. So I think that there are studios out there that are either like very innovative and maybe take really huge risks, and from a commercial perspective don't have that guarantee. versus going on the other side of the spectrum and sticking purely to what works. So cloning what has been done before and just putting out more and more games that have tried and tested mechanics. But I think we're somewhere in between. So we want to innovate, we want to take some risks, but in a more calculated way, and also have some of the iterations of the games that are close to what's worked before. So when we're also innovating, we're thinking about not just innovating, but innovating effectively and really making sure we're taking the right decisions with that.
So I've been in gaming 20 years. I didn't know that different markets liked different type of slots. How does that work? Could you explain?
Absolutely. So thanks to the data that we have, we've been able to also narrow down certain things that work in certain markets, certain things that don't work in certain markets. And it's quite a wide thing in terms of feedback that we've gotten. And we've gotten feedback from operators, from players directly, and from the data as well. So for example, when Avatar started out, we actually made very volatile games, and we had a mechanic, we still have a mechanic, of course, called PopWins, which is very successful and put us on the map. Many players know us for this mechanic as well. And initially, what we were releasing were very volatile games, and we noticed that there were certain players, even certain demographics, typically the younger male audience, that were more engaged, were retaining more frequently on those games, were sticking more to those games. However, what we saw is that, for example, in certain European markets, the retention pattern was a little bit different, and the bets per session, the bets per user were a bit on the lower side. So then we started understanding that, hey, actually, we can't, afford to put something that might be a bit on the extreme side in terms of volatility or math profile to the wider audience. Another huge thing is the complexity. Because even if we have maybe a math model that's a bit on the tamer side, if the game isn't easy to understand, it isn't easy to pick up, it could even make the player feel confused or unsure about what's happening, right? So there are some players that like that, actually. There are some players that want that. But what we've seen is, for example, the vast majority, especially in the European regulated space, prefer something that's easy to digest, easy to pick up, and easy to use.
Going back to the volatility, I think one of the most interesting things that I ever learned from a slot machine provider was one of the big guys who had, like, everyone knows them. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention their name, but they had, like, it was early on in the gaming industry when they probably had like a 20-30% market share, and they got a load of slot machine players, and they put this these machines on where they could monitor their feelings and monitor their emotions. And one of the most enlightening things I ever heard was that, like the feature games when you have to get like 3 symbols, and they actually found that the endorphin rates of the players were higher when they got 2 out of 3 than when they got a big win. So the slot machine players were actually getting more excited at being close to a big win than a big win. I found that quite enlightening. So what is it that makes your game stand out compared to some of the other slot machine providers out there?
So we do have a few things that make our game stand out, and I think this past year has been especially interesting when it comes to us pushing ourselves to the next level. So traditionally, we've been really well known for our PopWins games, and we've had huge hits like Cherry Pop, Monkey Pop, Critter Pop that have had this PopWins mechanic. But we had regularly received feedback that, are you going to do something else? Is there more in store for you rather than just PopWins? And actually, we've been experimenting and trying out a whole lot of new different mechanics, different features, and different type of games. So, for example, when it comes to our mechanics, they make us stand out. And if, for example, we talk about Pegasus Fortunes, which is a game that we have that's coming out this year, we have the mechanic called infinity stacks. And one thing that's really kind of challenging when it comes to game studios innovating on new mechanics is that where's the innovation? Because somebody already did it. It's a very saturated market. There's kind of very little space to innovate. And even though it's still possible, what we've seen a lot of competitors doing is going on again more of a complex side when it comes to the mechanics. So what we're trying to do is be innovative, but also keep it simple so that the mechanic feels easy to kind of get into as a player, and it's not something that will take the player kind of aback and where they would think like, what is this, So in this game, we have the mechanic infinity stacks, which is a bit of a different flow on how stacks and cascades work.
Yeah.
And it's something that also has an infinite potential. So we thought about, you mentioned anticipation before, right? And we wanted to kind of integrate that within the spin at different points in time. So not just after a win when you would get a cascade, but actually as the board lands, your stacks will cascade down into each other, and the player feels like they have a waterfall of symbols, so to speak, that can keep flowing down. So that's, on the one hand, that what keeps us standing out is that we're able to innovate and keep things going forward. Another thing is also from the visual identity perspective, we have, really amazing talent in-house that have kind of developed a very strong visual identity for us. So it makes our games stand out. And it might seem like a surface level thing, but when we have a very saturated market and players are scrolling in the lobby and they can see so many thumbnails, we have some games that will actually get that player to stop scrolling and click on those thumbnails. And that's what we want to aim for with some of our releases. So we have a release that was done this year called Silicone Spinners, for example, and that was something very fun that the team has worked on. It's a satirical and very humorous game featuring, some tech giants from the industry, which I'm not allowed to name, but we definitely had a lot of fun working on that game and a lot of feedback as well. And it also makes the game kind of more memorable for the player because they will say, okay, that's that game. And we also have some Easter eggs in that game as well. So that was something that I felt kind of really makes us stand out.
Yeah, that's certainly popular. Easter's just around the corner. I do love playing those seasonal slots. Like you always see, like, for instance, at Christmas, all the Father Christmas slots come out. So with that infinity stacks, does the player potentially get unlimited free spins until it max wins, basically?
It's a potential, yes, that they can keep getting stacks and stacks of symbols as long as they're getting the same symbol in a cell. And the stacks will come in and pile in and continue piling in until the symbol is no longer the same. So you can potentially get a full board with very, very high multipliers. And then if you manage to hit a win, you can get a really, really high max win.
Oh, nice. So does the multiplier increase every time you get an extra stack?
Exactly.
They're really exciting, those. Yeah. They've just started bringing those in a bit more frequently in the land-based, and they go up to about 256x. So when you're playing £1 a spin, that gets pretty exciting because the limit in the UK is like £2 a spin. But with that multiplier, it takes it up to like 512x. It's really exciting.
Exactly. And there's anticipation kind of embedded into the spin itself because you never really know if you're going to hit it in this spin or in the next spin. There's nothing to kind of collect over a long, session. It's just something that can happen at any point. So yeah, we definitely want to see how the player and market responds to that mechanic. And of course, it's as we discussed previously, right? Like we'll take the learnings, we will iterate and improve on the next one.
It's a really exciting mechanic as a player because every spin gets more exciting and it's all within one spin. So if you get like 5 or 6, it starts to gets really exciting. So how many games are you releasing this year then?
We're aiming to release a good number of games, over 20 games. We still have the roadmap for the last few months being developed, but essentially what we're aiming for is 3 games a month minimum, and we're looking to increase that to 4 games a month by end of Q4.
And how many operators, how many casinos are your games available at now?
Definitely a large number. I think it's a few thousand. To be honest, I don't have that number on hand right now, but we do cover quite a lot of markets. We have also been working on increasing our distribution pipeline. And one thing, for example, that we've seen quite recently is an increase in the sweepstakes casino traffic. So we can definitely see that our games are resonating quite well there, and it seems like it's a growing market for many studios. So it's quite refreshing to look at that, because we have a new use case for a player behavior, since it's a social casino, not a real money casino. So that gives us also another edge to think about, like, how might we make games for this market? How might we adapt and think about what these kind of players are looking for?
Yeah, I have noticed that playing on the social casinos, the games are slightly different to the real money ones, aren't they? Just a little bit. They're usually a slightly reduced version, I think, from my experience. So what's with the sweepstakes market? This is a kind of new market that's starting to emerge and grow over the last few years.
Absolutely, and we've only started getting some spikes in traffic quite recently, so a few months, maybe even end of last year. But it's definitely been increasing at a rapid stage, and we have been speaking to the operators that are working on the sweepstakes casinos and trying to understand, what works well in this market. It seems to be primarily US players that are playing there, and we've noticed, for example, that a lot of your classical games, 3 bonus kind of games, hold and win, coin games, tend to do quite well. We've noticed maybe not the too extreme or too volatile games are maybe not the best for that market, although there are specific casinos that still want that. And it's definitely an interesting space, and it's changing quite often.
There's certainly room for innovation in there. I think as a player, I play those social, and the only thing I find is the games are very basic. There's a good range of games, but it's usually the same mechanics, just with different graphics. So I'm sure there's certainly a lot of scope in there. And as a company, how old is AvatarUX now? You've been in the market for a while.
Yes, so it's been 6 years now. I mean, we were founded in 2019. And essentially the goal was how might we stand out as a new slot provider against other huge companies, other huge giants. And that's exactly what we did, right? So when we opened, we developed the mechanic PopWins. It set us on the map. We had a lot of traction with that mechanic, with players, with different markets as well. And now here we are, and we have a lot more in plan as well.
And there's quite a few. How many people work at your company now? Quite a few.
Yes, I mean, in the studio space, it's just over 20 people, and as a company, we're 35 people. So we're still quite a small studio, and we're very tightly knit. But it also gives us a bit of an advantage, because we have very end-to-end ownership on things. So, for example, we have artists learning about math design, for example, and mathematicians understanding how animations work in games. And at the end of the kind of day, when we have the product and we're looking at the review, we get feedback from everybody, because they want the game to feel good on all aspects, not just on one element like the visuals or on the math, and it helps gel everything together as well. So if we're looking at an extremely volatile game, we want the art to feel a bit more edgy. We want the sounds to be on a particular scale. So it's definitely a very tight-knit and close team, and we're actually quite diverse as well. So we have people in Asia, we have people in Europe, and it's a very, very diverse and multicultural team.
And what's sort of the roadmap over the next few years for the company?
So we have a lot in store, and I mean, I think we have the same challenges as everybody else as well that we're trying to figure out, which is how to retain players. But from our product point of view, we have more mechanics coming out this year. We have 2 confirmed mechanics coming out this year, and as I said, we have a lot more games to go as well. We're also implementing more modular systems on a tech level that can be reused across titles, which will allow us to iterate and learn faster. And on the player side, again, retention is a big focus. So we're looking at tools that can help us bring more reactivity into our games. Things like progression systems or events that are kind of FOMO driven, that will kind of want to keep the player playing consistently. We've invested more heavily in data and community events to get feedback as well, and understanding even further how different segments and even specific players or player personas interact with our content, so we can keep refining the math models and UX. And on the data side, it's been very eye-opening. So the past few months, we've been looking into data a bit more closer. So we've been getting the hard facts about certain things, like why a player would drop off, or understanding that actually we have a large player base that only play buy bonus, for example, that will not even play a typical spin. They will just play buy bonus. We even saw that there are some players playing slots on VR browsers, which we would have never known if we didn't, get the data. So it really brings in the perspective and helps direct us to the next steps.
I don't think VR and slots has quite got there, have they? I saw NetEnt demonstrating it at a conference years ago, but it still hasn't come into the mainstream, has it? I don't think the technology's there quite yet, is it? The hardware, I mean.
Definitely not. I mean, I think that as a market as well, in terms of when we talk about the products, it's a slow pace market, right? So I think when we're introducing, even on a mechanic level, like introducing something completely wild, like instant games, for example, which we have also tried, right? It's a huge step from slots. The market adoption for that is it's still high risk, right? So it's not typically for everyone. And I think when it comes to new technologies or modes of play like VR, it might potentially be in the same, the same reason there.
Yeah, I think it goes for gaming as well, generally, until there's a PlayStation 6 with VR built in. I think one of the problems is the big heavy headset. Like after like half an hour with that on, it starts to get a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it?
Exactly, it's unpractical, especially when you want players to kind of stick there and engage and stay on for a bit. But when it comes to slots, I mean, many players play on their phone. We have 85% of players playing on their mobile, and many of them are actually out and about. They might be at a cafeteria or a bar or where it's not that easy to bring a VR headset with you. So that's not, your typical player that would use that.
Yeah, I think they're very expensive as well. I mean, I think that new Facebook one that came out last year was like $1,500, €1,500 or something, wasn't it? It's quite inhibitive for the lower demographics, isn't it? If you got a lot of money, but I'm sure it'll get there one day.
Yeah. I think a new way of playing in the future is what the industry could shift into, because it's quite saturated, and when we have like saturated products, saturated markets, then you need something really, really different to disrupt everything and to change things and get everybody on a new path. So that could be like a new technology or a completely different commercial model or form of play. It could be anything. Like, who knows what the future holds.
I quite like the celebrity involvement. A contact of mine has just started. He's the agent for Slipknot, a big band,
nice.
And they've just made a Slipknot fruit machine. And I think when it's like that, they've already got the audience, and the mechanics and stuff don't matter as much. I think that would work quite well. I see that as, I mean, I've seen like quite a few bands and celebrities have released their fruit machines, haven't they? I've seen like Rocky and Guns N' Roses and such like. I think that works quite well.
Definitely.
So what do you see as the future of slot machines? What's going to be the next big thing over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We have, there are a few companies working on more social elements, more multiplayer elements when it comes to exploring different modes of play. I think when I think about the future of real gaming slots, I think about social mostly. So when we look at other companies like Playtika, for example, that have Slotomania, they have so many features in there that are social features that could be potentially adapted in the real money gaming space, and having a more collaborative kind of form of play. I've seen games that, for example, allow players to develop their own avatar, have that profile there as they're playing, play in a group, and then, for example, have everybody's avatar spinning on a reel, and then depending on which avatar lands, that player would potentially win a cash prize. So integrating that not just on a social level in terms of chat, for example, but into the gameplay itself. So I think that's one element. And then I think that with all this experimentation going on with instant games, there are so many instant games out there, so many different mechanics and forms of play. I feel like one of them will eventually hit, just like it did, just like Scribe successfully did. And I feel like, okay, there's potential for more. But it seems like it's still quite a high risk, endeavor to operate on.
I'd love to see that. I haven't actually seen that, but personalizing slot machines, like if you could pick your music, your colors, and if you could pick your pictures that you put on the reels, that sounds quite interesting. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge source of inspiration for us as well. We also released a game actually early January called Pixel Pause, which I don't know if you remember these like virtual pets that there were in the so that's all about that kind of theme. And we added a very small fluff mechanic where the player can change the background color to match kind of maybe that virtual pet that they had in the past. But absolutely, when we talk about personalization, right, like that's the next level of engagement as well. So adding that into the mechanic itself would make it more unique, more something to remember for the player.
And with the I guess there's no legislation or compliance issues with that. If I wanted to put my face onto the jackpot symbol, I guess there's no legal issues with that, is there?
I mean, I would have to ask our lawyer, definitely. But I mean, you can see that on the regulatory side, right? There's a certain pace of how things are being done, and usually there's like a gap between something being done and then it getting regulated. And it seems like companies are trying to find these gaps of opportunity to operate in, and maybe even loopholes that end up being market.
I guess the legal risk with that is if you put symbols on the machine of people under the age of 18, it then breaches all sorts of rules, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And when we talk about purely social, it's a different legal space again. So there might be things that just simply don't apply anymore, which again change the product offering, the product landscape as well.
Okay, very interesting. Is there anything else that you would like to add as we come towards the close of our meeting?
Not much from my end. I mean, we definitely have a huge roadmap planned ahead. We're definitely, very, very excited for this year. We're not going to stop pushing. We know that it's a very challenging market as well, and we're still growing. We've had huge growth over the past year, and I think there's much, much more to come.
Yeah, I can see that. You're obviously doing a great job. You're growing quickly, lots of new games coming out. You're on thousands of operators. I guess that covers most of the online casinos in the business. So congratulations. You're obviously doing a great job over at AvatarUX.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Christian.
No, thanks very much for your time today. It's been lovely to meet you and learn about your business. Guys, I'll put all of Avatar's details in the description below. So if you want to contact them and speak to them, you'll have all of their contact details. Thanks very much for your time today. It's been lovely to meet you, Hannah. And guys, thanks very much for watching. Have a nice day. Thanks very much.